clarifying that the Scout are state recognized in Connecticut, and yes, we acknowledge that you all are rightfully so looking for recognition in New York. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for joining today. Okay, so thank you so much to those who have joined so far. That's just the cue that we are starting to record this meeting to be able to share the recording with others who were not able to join today. We're just going to wait another minute for more folks to join, but thank you everyone for making time to join today and for being on time. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Jenny Singbach and I'm a member of NYSERDA's Energy and Climate Equity team. Thank you so much for joining today. We would like to encourage everyone to introduce yourselves over the chat, and you can share and if you go to the next slide, we can show what folks can introduce themselves in chat, so you can share your name, your pronouns, your affiliation or region in New York, and feel free to answer the question, what does an inclusive clean energy economy mean to you? So we have Dan Russell, he, him, and I believe Dan is from the Public Utility Law Project. So make sure to share what organization you're affiliated with. We have Arlene Way, who's from the Arbor Hill Community Development Corporation. We have Nikki Hill Patterson from Adirondack Diversity Initiative. Daniel Chu, he, they from New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. Thanks so much everyone for joining. So feel free to continue introducing yourselves, your name, pronouns, affiliation, and what an inclusive clean energy economy means to you in the chat. We have Lindsay Griffin, she, her, Float Solar. And we will get started with introducing ourselves from NYSERDA and going over the agenda. So I will hand it over to Michael Geremio.
Thanks, Jenny. And thanks everybody here for being here with us today. Appreciate you taking the time to learn more about what we're planning, and hopefully we'll be working with many of you on in the future. I really think this is a real milestone for NYSERDA, so I hope you're as excited as I know our team is after this presentation today. So my name is Michael Geremio. I'm the Assistant Director for the Energy and Climate Equity team at NYSERDA. We are focused at NYSERDA on working across our programs to work towards an inclusive clean energy economy where all communities have a voice and benefit from, and in particular disadvantaged communities, benefit from our clean energy programs and policies. So We have another organization here, Hester Street, on the line with us. They are a consultant working to help us launch this Energy Equity Collaborative. That's the focus of the call today. We will be providing an overview. Actually, if you could go back just one slide, the slide before. We'll be providing, after some introductions, and actually one more forward. I'm sorry, one more forward. I went the wrong way. Yeah, there we go. So after some a little bit of overview, I'll give you on objectives for the call today. We're going to give an overview of this, what we're calling the Energy Equity Collaborative, followed by some more detail on the founding steering committee that we're looking to form and applying to join that founding body, as well, then followed by a question and answer session. And next steps in closing, I'll just encourage everybody to participate actively in this. I will say too that our what we're going to present today was the result of months of work with many community organizations, voice and perspectives included, over the past 9 months, really, or plus. So what you're seeing is the culmination of a lot of dialogue, discussion, and then leading up to where we are today. So then next slide, please. So quickly, the community agreements, what we're asking everybody on the call today to follow is one mic. So that's this idea of please stay on mute unless you're speaking. You can just check that on the side there on the bar. If you're on a computer, it should have a little microphone that you can unmute or mute yourself. 3 before me. So this is the idea that we want to make sure that there's an equitable opportunity for people to participate. So if you speak, waiting for another 3 people to speak before you speak again. Want to just let everybody know we are recording this. And then finally, request that you hold your questions until the final section of the call today. You will have the chance to enter those in the Q&A or the chat feature in WebEx if you're familiar with that. And that was described earlier. Or you can also raise your hand. There's a little hand icon that you can raise and ask your question verbally. So next slide. So our objectives today are to inform anyone interested about the purpose of the Energy Equity Collaborative that I just mentioned, to share information about what this opportunity looks like and what it would take to apply to serve on this founding body, what we're calling the founding steering committee, to clarify any questions that people may have around the application process and the selection process, and then to generally just address any general questions. So next slide, please. So to kick us off here, going to give a bit of an overview on what we're calling the Energy Equity Collaborative body. And so if we can go to the next slide. But first, it's, I think, really helpful to provide context and background. And some key background that underpins this collaboration is the landmark Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that was passed and signed into law in 2019 through the hard work and persistence of many, many community and environmental organizations over years, and resulted in that act, which is now been in place for 3 years now. And we've been hard at work at NYSERDA to advance many of the goals in that act. In addition to the climate and clean energy goals, which we're not going to cover today in that act, we are going to focus instead on the mandates that call for specifically benefiting disadvantaged, what the act refers to as disadvantaged communities. These are as far as the definition of what those communities are, for the purposes of this process that we're going into today. It is broader than what is in the Act, but what's in the Act calls for a climate justice working group, which has been established and at work to define what a disadvantaged community is. That group has a proposed definition that's being deliberated right now. In the meantime, there's an interim definition at that web link that you can see right here. I will say that it is inclusive of what is in that interim definition for the purposes of this collaborative. We are inclusive of that definition, as well as hard to reach, underserved rural communities, indigenous nations, and other areas of the state with high levels of poverty and limited access to resources. So we really want to build a big tent here of under-resourced communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. Next slide. So at NYSERDA, we recognize the need to acknowledge, one slide too far. Yeah. At NYSERDA, we recognize the need to acknowledge the legacy and current reality faced as a result of, at least in part, of public policy faced by these communities that we're talking about here, with whom we know we at NYSERDA need to engage meaningfully in this work towards building an inclusive and just clean energy transition. We need to learn and evolve how, in particular, how we partner as a state with communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. Next slide. So with that recognition, and I would say that is held across the authority, we recognize that and are in the process of responding, and that's in part what we're here to talk with you today, with that backdrop. And so part of our response is recognizing that we need to develop a more equitable approach to engaging with communities and in particular centering their experiences and their expertise around their communities and what will work and what will not work in order to accomplish the Climate Act goals. Next slide. So a cornerstone of that equitable engagement strategy is recognizing that we need to collaborate with organizations that serve and represent historically marginalized communities to ensure that their experiences are front and center in our planning here at NYSERDA. So, that really sets the backdrop for working differently. We, here at NYSERDA, and the specific opportunity we want to speak with you today is part of that, the Energy Equity Collaborative. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jenny to talk us through what is the collaborative, what's its purpose, and more. Thanks, Jenny.
All right, so hi everyone. My name is Jenny Singbach again, she, her. I'm on NYSERDA's Energy and Climate Equity team. And I have a background in doing climate justice organizing work with communities in New York State and across the US and different countries and globally. So I'm really excited to be helping create this energy equity collaborative body with communities in New York. And many of you who have been organizations and individuals on this call have been part of the process of creating this new initiative. So what exactly is the Energy Equity Collaborative? It is a shared forum, shared space for collaboration, again, between those that serve and represent historically marginalized and otherwise disadvantaged communities and NYSERDA. And we will work in coordination with other state agencies and authorities, including members of the Low Income Energy Task Force. The Energy Equity Collaborative, or for short, the Collaborative, will provide a forum for disadvantaged community groups and NYSERDA to discuss and work together to address energy equity and climate justice issues and to design equitable programs. And the Collaborative will convene through regular meetings, informational webinars, and an annual conference. So the purpose, to elaborate a little bit more, next slide, on what we hope to achieve through the Energy Equity Collaborative is, again, we want to create a shared space for deeper collaboration with those that serve and represent historically marginalized communities, NYSERDA, and other interagency partners as needed. We hope to ensure that the experiences and concerns and needs of those on the front lines of the climate crisis are identified and included in the early stage development and ground level implementation of NYSERDA's climate and energy programs. And we want to organize engagements with working groups that are focused on priority topics such as environmental justice, workforce development, energy affordability, and clean energy deployment. Organizations, next slide. Organizations representing historically marginalized communities who participate in the collaborative can directly inform and influence clean energy programs and policy to ensure community needs are met and communities receive an equitable share of clean energy investments and benefits. Organizations that participate in the collaborative will also save time by utilizing a central platform to connect with multiple program teams and executives at NYSERDA, which will coordinate with interagency low-income energy task force members as needed. And organizations that participate will also help through the collaborative to ensure transparency and accountability of NYSERDA and other state agencies through public meetings, documentation, and incorporating to making sure that feedback is incorporated in the implementation of our programs. Next slide. Some of the activities that the founding steering committee that will help lead this collaborative body, some of the activities the founding steering committee will participate in include developing the Energy Equity Collaborative Charter. So really kind of developing what is the scope, what are the policy priorities of the collaborative, how will the structure look for how different pieces of the collaborative will interact with each other. And we've proposed working groups, but we want to make sure that the founding steering committee has, is able to have ownership in developing the final structure of the collaborative and how things will work. The founding steering committee will identify ways to work with NYSERDA. Again, what are the priority issues that we should be focusing on addressing through the collaborative. The founding steering committee will create sector-specific working groups, which will include identifying barriers and opportunities that we can address through reforms to existing programs and new programs. The steering committee will partner with NYSERDA in program design. And we really want to emphasize that this is a space to collaborate with communities to develop equitable programs and design programs, in coordination and collaboration with communities, which is a newer practice for us that we're really excited about. And the steering committee will share best practices and lessons learned. We really want this to be a space for communities and community groups to share lessons and practices with each other. Okay, next slide. So now to get a little more in depth about the steering committee, the founding steering committee's role in the collaborative and the opportunity to apply to serve on the steering committee, we wanted to share more information about what the steering committee's role will be. So if you go to the next slide, we are excited that the application to serve on the steering committee is open currently, and it's available on our website to apply. We are inviting all any community-based organization to apply to serve on the Energy Equity Collaborative's founding steering committee. And specifically, we're encouraging community-based organizations whose mission is to serve disadvantaged communities to apply for this one-year paid appointment. And for more information about the collaborative itself, please feel free to read the more in-depth roles and responsibilities overview document that goes a lot more in depth into the purpose of the collaborative, the proposed structure for how it will work, again, which will be finalized by the founding steering committee. And we just dropped a link in the chat to this. So And just a reminder, the deadline to apply to serve on the steering committee is September 22nd. So next slide. So what exactly will the founding steering committee be doing? The founding steering committee's role is really critical for the collaborative. It's the leadership body of the collaborative. It will co-lead the collaborative with support from NYSERDA and from our energy climate equity team. And it will be providing guidance, feedback, and recommendations on how to advance an inclusive clean energy economy in New York State. The founding steering committee will be comprised of frontline community groups and other community organizations that serve and represent historically marginalized communities. And founding steering committee members will serve a one-year term and determine, again, the governance structure, including how future steering committees will be selected and the focus areas for the collaborative, which will be the basis for organizing working groups. Next slide. As the leadership body of the collaborative, the founding steering committee has various responsibilities. So just to go more depth on them, again, they will be responsible for developing the collaborative's charter, which will include the structure, mission, guidelines, norms for communication, leadership, meetings, and compensation for participation in the collaborative. The steering committee will determine initial goals and working groups on which to focus collaboration. It will interface directly with NYSERDA leadership and staff on emerging energy issues. It will organize and participate in sessions dedicated to shared understanding of NYSERDA programs and related regulations and leverage points and related community concerns. It will coordinate with NYSERDA on communication with participating interagency state partners as needed. It will co-manage the collaborative's working groups and annual gathering or conference. It will co-lead the announcement and outreach to engage frontline communities as members of the collaborative. So we will work with the founding steering committee to do larger community outreach to build the larger membership of the collaborative itself. And the steering committee will help select and provide direction to subcontractors, which will be supporting the administrative functionings of the collaborative. Next slide. The founding steering committee time commitment is, again, we've mentioned 1 year, with the possibility to extend if the founding steering committee needs more time to achieve all of the, the first year priorities of developing the structure, the charter, and, et cetera, for what we need to do to stand up this body as a new initiative. We're estimating that the steering committee will need to dedicate 8 hours per month to different collaborative steering committee activities. And the activities, again, include attending a monthly or quarterly steering committee meeting and attending monthly working group meetings. And the cadence for how often the steering committee meets and how often working groups will meet will again be determined by the founding steering committee, but we're trying to give an estimate so folks can gauge if they have the time to commit to this. Next slide. So in terms of what kinds of organizations we're looking to serve on the founding steering committee, NYSERDA will use the founding steering committee selection criteria that we developed in collaboration with community organizations, many of which are on this call, as a guide for selecting founding steering committee members. In subsequent years, the steering committee will be selected by the Energy Equity Collaborative membership based on the governance structure and selection process developed by the founding steering committee. For this round of selection, preference will be given to organizations that meet as many of the selection criteria as possible. And we'll go over the selection criteria in more depth a little later in this call. But generally, we're looking for organizations, New York State-based, community-based organizations, and you can refer to the document, the overview document for the definition of a community-based organization that we're using. But we're looking for New York State-based community organizations that principally serve or based in a New York State disadvantaged community, and Again, we're using the interim definition of what a disadvantaged community is. So you can refer to the overview document for how we're defining that for this purposes of the application. And by serve, we mean that greater than 50% of the work of the organization is in service of disadvantaged communities. The organization should also have expertise in clean energy equity or climate justice issues, and have a primary mission, again, of advocating or serving disadvantaged communities. And we will go over that criteria a little more in depth later on, but now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Michael Duramio to talk about the compensation involved for folks that are participating in the collaborative steering committee.
Thanks, Jenny. So we recognize this is a lot of time and effort that will be required to make this group happen, and we believe it's going to be worth it, and it will, you know, really be essential to our work and our helping to steer and guide a lot of the different programs and policy initiatives here at NYSERDA, and in coordination with other agencies potentially as well. They do want to just a little caveat there, say that like this doesn't necessarily, of course, take the place of other formal settings at other agencies, but we do think that this is a space to connect the dots, if you will, and we are committed at NYSERDA to helping connect those dots with the agencies as needed. So recognizing the time and effort that this would require, we are offering compensation for founding steering committee members, in particular those from under-resourced community-based organizations, for these first year activities at a minimum. This offer of compensation really builds on our intent here is to build the capacity of under-resourced community-based organizations to participate in these kinds of policy and program planning efforts, and the rates that you see here below are reflective of a separate request for information that we conducted the past several months and got lots of comments back, and then have now put together these rates based on all the comments we received, as well as the standard reflecting on our own analysis of what is the standard rates we offer regular consultants. We want to really have equity be part of it, so that we're really valuing and demonstrating that the value of community lived experience and knowledge and expertise. So what you see here is a rate structure. So this would include prep time and follow-up, for various meetings that would happen related to the founding steering committee, or specific asks related to the founding steering committee. So all of that time would be compensated according to this structure here. Beyond the first year, so part of the mandate, like Jenny mentioned, of the founding steering committee is to determine the criteria and guidelines for beyond that 1 year time frame, how organizations would be compensated. Obviously, this would be done in coordination and consultation with NYSERDA. We are sponsoring and funding this, but really looking to the founding steering committee to determine the guidelines for how this is done beyond the first year. And again, this first year was done in consultation with many community-based organizations, so we hope it is reflective of that. Next slide. So how we're going to evaluate these applications is shown here on the next 2 slides. We will be organizing a group of unconflicted individuals to serve as reviewers of the applications to join the founding steering committee. These unconflicted individuals are from non-governmental and community-based organizations, along with government, including NYSERDA staff. But the intention is to be majority non-government, though. You can see here what's listed as far as it's what's listed is in order of importance or weight. The weight of each is listed here. And this again was done based on the comments we got from speaking with over 30 different organizations about what you all and others thought were the most important criteria to consider. So number one is accountability and representation of communities. And number two is, the ability of an organization to demonstrate that they have been able to have impact on those communities that they are based in and or serve. Next slide. Number three would be recognizing that we need to really recognize the leadership of, in particular, Black, Indigenous, and people of color led organizations within historically marginalized communities in this effort. And so that is a criteria as well. Fourth is geographic representation. So we want to obviously ensure that there's diversity of all of the above, plus from a geographic perspective, because we know New York's a big state and there's lots of different types of issues that vary across the state. So we want to make sure there's good representation across the state. And finally is experience and expertise, particularly around issues related to equity, inclusion, access in clean energy around various sectors, think transportation, housing, industry, large scale renewables, etc. We're looking for organizations that have relevant experience with that subject matter and can contribute perspectives from that base. Just a tip here would be to encourage, we're not looking for the longest presentation or applications. We want this to be really simple. We intentionally designed this to be hopefully very clear. The application, the web form that's available hopefully is clear. Encourage you to create that in a separate document and then cut and paste just so you don't lose any information. But encourage you to start early, and working on that. But that length is not what matters here. It's just being able to speak to these criteria here in particular and your experience there. Yeah, so that I guess is it. I think I'm going to turn it back to Jenny.
Great, thank you, Michael. And I just dropped in the chat examples of topic areas that we're looking for organizations to have relevant lived experience and subject matter expertise in. So if you go to the next slide, to wrap this up, we wanted to just give an overview of the timeline for when the Founding Steering Committee will start to meet and the collaborative will be stood up as a body overall. So the summer, we are almost done with summer, but the summer through the fall, we will be reviewing the Founding Steering Committee member applications that we have received, and we'll be looking to select Founding Steering Committee members by the end of October or early November. And then we're looking for the Founding Steering Committee to start meeting by November or December, depending on when we are able to select the steering committee members. And the first series of meetings will occur between the fall, winter, and the spring of 2023. And these series of meetings will focus on finalizing the scope structure of the collaborative and identify working group areas. And in the spring, we're aiming to have a public announcement of the Energy Equity Collaborative, and we'll work with the Founding Steering Committee to prepare for this public launch. And we're aiming to have our first annual kickoff conference for the larger Energy Equity Collaborative membership in the fall of 2023. So with that, I want to just, next slide, remind you how to apply to serve on the steering committee. So again, The deadline to apply is September 22nd, and we dropped a link in the chat to the steering committee application itself. Happy to talk more offline if folks have more questions. But with that, we want to open it up for questions now. So next slide, we will begin our Q&A session. And to submit a question or a comment, you can either type it into the chat, or you can raise your hand and we will unmute you, and you'll be able to ask your question to the group. So we have one question from Mucaro Borrero. How many members will the steering committee seek to have? I can answer that question. So we're aiming to have 12 members on the steering committee, and that's just an estimate number, but we are looking to have, not too large of a group, that we can really achieve consensus-based decision-making, and not too small of a group. We want to make sure that we're really representative of the whole all the communities that are in New York, and make sure we have issue expertise represented. So hopefully that answers your question. About 12 with a little flexibility.
Jenny, I think I see another question here.
Sure.
Adam here about, the question is how this group, this collaborative group, will relate with and interact with the regional clean energy hubs, which is, for those of you that aren't familiar, we have a separate initiative where we are funding regional clean energy hubs or 12 of them across the state to really focus on outreach, awareness building, and education around clean energy opportunities with a focus on disadvantaged communities as well. Not exclusively, but a strong focus there. And that's a great question. We have been giving that some thought, and we hope to and plan to work with the founding steering committee to further define that relationship. I will say that one direct relationship is that there will be an advisory group, or I think it's now being referred to as a working group, that will be part of the collaborative, or a working group of the collaborative that will serve that advisory function to the hubs of, how do we expand the reach? How do we reach different communities that maybe aren't currently connected and aren't really or haven't been historically connected to any of the programs that we have available today at NYSERDA. So there's a very explicit connection there that has been set up, and expectations set with the hubs about that. Beyond that, I think the simplest way to, for me anyway, to describe it is, whereas the regional clean energy hubs will be focusing mostly at the regional level and on coordination, dot connecting, et cetera, and improving access to existing programs at NYSERDA at the regional level. The collaborative is at the statewide level, for one, and secondly is really more focused on the planning part, the planning process, right? At NYSERDA, early stage in development, we want to push upstream as much as possible in the stage of development of our initiatives here, and really working with frontline communities in informing that, in the very least, if not collaborating on the design of initiatives. And so that's really where the collaborative will be a body to identify those opportunities and the need to communicate about opportunities, and identify where there might be gaps both at NYSERDA and potentially, where there might be issues we need to work with at NYSERDA with other agencies around, for example, at the state level. So I hope that was somewhat helpful. again, there could be more of a connection there that we could explore. I think we're working through that as we go.
Thanks. And yeah, I'll just add that currently the hub directors are required to attend 2 working groups of the collaborative. And again, we're going to develop the working group topics with the founding steering committee, but I'm kind of assuming that there will be a community outreach working group, and that's probably the best fit for where the hub directors will coordinate with community outreach that they're doing, and making sure that we're also doing community outreach to assess how well programs are working and to get input on how we can, through the collaborative, take in input and to reform our current programs and potentially develop new equitable programs. Yeah, so the collaborative is really to help work on reforming our programs, designing new equitable programs, and the hubs will help us do the community outreach to get feedback on how we can better design our programs. And then Adam, to answer your second question, so we have done outreach throughout the state to try to get a representative, representation from all the geographic regions of the state. We did the initial outreach to work with community organizations to have the 3 co-planning sessions that we held in the fall and also in March to help do the early designing of the collaborative initiative. So that was one way we did outreach to different community organizations across the state. And we've also reached out to like a larger list of community organizations that work on environmental and climate justice issues and also on low-income energy issues, including organizations that were part of the former Low-Income Forum on Energy. And this is also a plug. We are very much interested in having you help us make sure to spread the word to any organizations that you think would be great candidates to be on the steering committee. So if you think of organizations specifically in rural parts of New York that you think would be great to apply, we might have already reached out, but it would be great to reach out to them as well. And we really appreciate your help in making sure this opportunity gets to the right folks.
Great. I can take the next question I see here, and I'm not sure if there's any hands raised too, so I don't want to lose track of that. If there are if there is anybody that wants to speak their question too, please. That's encouraged. We're not too big of a group here, so don't be shy. So Daniel asked the question here about how we are going to interact with other agencies so that we're not at cross purposes. And I think it's a great question, and I think the intention here is to focus first on NYSERDA programs, given that's what we control here at NYSERDA most directly and immediately, and we know we have a lot of work to do here. So our starting point is we want to be able to bring opportunities to the table that really are ones that we can act on. And so that's why we're starting. The focus is really on NYSERDA. At the same time, we recognize that NYSERDA programs are, exist within the braiding of various programs that at the end of the day come together to serve under-resourced community members. And so we absolutely are very mindful of that. We are working very closely, which is why we have the Low-Income Energy Task Force with us as a co-sponsor of this initiative, which will be, they've been invited to participate in the founding steering committee as a ex officio members, so that they are in the room, hearing, listening, and so that we can work with them to coordinate as needed on issues that are raised up. We know for sure that issues are not, we can't deal with them in isolation. And it'll also be interesting. We're mindful too of, and I think Adam, you had a follow-on question here related to the scoping plan coming out of the Climate Act, which is, going to be happening over the next, months here, coming up with that plan that, there may be further opportunities that can be identified for how this group, how this collaborative could support any of those proposals or components of the plan that are included. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. And again, I think we're walking this line right now of providing hopefully enough clarity to know what you'd be signing up for without being overly prescriptive about what it will actually focus on and do, because we're very intentional about this being the focus of this group being determined with this founding body, this founding steering committee. So we don't want to get out ahead of that. Even if we are doing a lot of work on our own to try to create the conditions both with other agencies as well as internally, which I could give a whole other presentation on, but internally working with our various program teams so that they're equipped, they understand what our goals are and so that we can ensure there's accountability internally at NYSERDA with any questions that are raised or issues or opportunities that are identified, et cetera.
And yeah, I'll just add that the Low Income Energy Task Force, this interagency task force, is comprised of Department of Public Service, which regulates our electric utilities, Department of State, which also is involved in a lot of community programs and clean energy work, Department of Environmental Conservation, which has, everyone's familiar, is also helping lead the implementation of the Climate Act, as well as HCR, Housing Community Renewal. They do a lot of housing related, especially affordable housing related, clean energy, climate work. What else am I thinking of? Yeah, so just so you're aware of the different state agencies that we will be coordinating with at NYSERDA through the Low Income Energy Task Force, and who will be participating in the collaborative. Did I miss any agencies, Michael?
I'm not sure. But I think that's the other opportunity. We have grown it some. We have included some additional agencies, and there's an opportunity there, again, in consultation with the founding steering committee. I will also mention that this collaborative body has been noted in the several scoping plan related discussions, but also the report, the Disadvantaged Communities Barriers and Opportunities report that was put out by NYSERDA, DEC, and NYPA at the end of December last year. There's reference to this as a model for how we need to be working differently, more meaningfully, and collaborating with historically marginalized communities in the development of our initiatives. And yeah, so I think I think, Adam, your question here about engaging SUNY, state ed, et cetera, workforce is a fair point. DOL, et cetera. I think we are working with our workforce team. I think that could be, I believe that was one of the proposed working groups that came out of those co-planning sessions that Jenny was talking about, was around workforce development. So all this is stuff we would need to dive into more and work through, especially with all these federal dollars that are coming down now and going to be continuing to come down over the next several years. Like, how can we leverage those, combine, braid, et cetera, the various agency resources together to have the, biggest impact on these communities we're talking about.
And sorry, one other agency involved is the OTDA, Office of Temporary Disability Assistance. Yeah. Arlene Way has a question, is from Arbor Hill Community Development Corporation. Is travel involved? That's a good question. We are hoping to eventually have the founding steering committee meet in person, at least, somewhat regularly, just to help foster relationship building, which we think is going to be a key component to the success of this collaborative body. And we all know that, yeah, relationship building is key to really doing meaningful work with communities. So we're still working out, obviously, with the safety concerns around the pandemic, what this will look like, and we're eager to work with the founding steering committee to figure out what's the best approach to take in this regard of your folks' preferences on how often we should do in-person meetings. I think we're hoping at least that the fall 2023 conference will be in person. And so that, I think, is some travel involved. And again, the compensation that we're providing through the disadvantaged communities honorarium will compensate for participation in meetings. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say I think we're yeah, like Jenny mentioned, I think that will be determined with, again, all this is like we don't want to be too definitive, because we want the founding steering committee to weigh in here. But I think our focus first and foremost is on participation and ability to participate. And we're mindful this is a big state we're in, so we want to make sure that you know, equity and access to participate in these meetings is like the prime consideration. And then, but yeah, like Jenny mentioned, I think, you know, in consultation with the committee, we'll explore, you know, we absolutely be willing to host in-person meetings, you know, in different parts of the state. And yeah, I think, Adam, I see another question here from you about anything beyond if it goes beyond 8 hours. And I will say that we, as imagined, we are looking at, you know, a co-chair with us at NYSERDA of this steering committee, this founding steering committee, that would, you know, likely would exceed that 8 hours, that role. Um, and yeah, absolutely, we're committed to compensating for the time that's needed. Obviously, that's, you know, we'll need to be clear about that and setting expectations about that. But yeah, we're committed to sticking with or providing compensation for any of the asks of organizations that participate in this committee. And we have the funding set aside to do that.
And I think, Adam, we see that you have your hand raised. Do you want to, or maybe
Yeah,
I'll.
can you
Mhm.
take Betta's question first? I'll just stay online.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I've been saying a lot or typing a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Okay. Following the 3 and me rule. So Betta asked, would each organization have one representative participate, or could a couple of people attend meetings? I think we're open to, you know, working with what is preferable for organizations. But I think we're looking to have organization representatives serve on the founding steering committee. So we want to just make sure that there is equal representation amongst communities across the state and different perspectives and experiences and voices. And I think with that, we also want to clarify that a lot of organizations I know work in coalitions. So we do want to make sure that we did ask this in the application, a question on, are you applying to serve on the steering committee as your organization or as a representative of a coalition? That way we can make sure that the coalition is not overrepresented on the steering committee. So hopefully that helps clarify things better. But if for example, if the set staff person that is normally serving on the steering committee, you know, can't attend certain meetings and wants to have someone fill in, I think we're, you know, open to that.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
fine.
our preference would be to have an individual person from an individual organization committing to participate in this, because it is going to be very much rolling up the sleeves and relationship building and working through and having that context of everything, with an individual, I think will be really helpful to moving this process forward quickly, which I think we always struggle with, right? Like, we know that these issues are urgent and we want to make progress. We also know we don't want to move too fast. We need to bring people along and meet people where they are. But it will be helpful if we are able to have individual members of an organization be committed to this group and consistently participating. Um, we could talk about that with the founding steering committee about others participating. I will say that from a compensation perspective, the intention would be to how we've laid this out in other instances as well is per organization. This honorarium is offered per organization. So if we were to agree to that, like multiple people can be present, we would be compensating one time for the organization, not for any multiple staff per se.
Okay, any other questions folks have before we go back to Adam Flynn? All right, seeing none. Adam?
Yeah, this actually dovetails well with what Michael was just suggesting in terms of the balance between process and speed. I'm really very concerned about this next winter for a number of reasons, including that just for what we're seeing with Empower for gas customers, it's just not going to really cut it. And we're likely to see greatly increased demand because of the interest that's being stirred up by the IRA, and also that will be stirred up by the regional hubs. I really feel like we're going to be in a bit of a pickle. A lot of people not being able to be served in a timely fashion or at all. So all of that is to say, I don't know if this is a question or a suggestion, but with the regional hubs, one of the things that we're trying to do is understanding that we're dealing with imperfect systems that have been in existence, but we want to try and make change as quickly as is feasible. So I guess what I'm hoping is that even though this body's reason for being is to stand up a system for this collaborative and so forth, that if there are specific recommendations in the near term that really feel urgent, that we could make those recommendations in some way, because it sounds like this group will be in contact with a number of different agencies, with a number of different people within NYSERDA, as well as ourselves across the state, whoever gets appointed. So again, I'm not sure if that's a question or a suggestion, but take it as you will.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. I think we anticipate that, Adam, and agree that we'll be needing to do the proverbial building a plane while flying it to some degree, with as specific issues emerge both externally, market conditions like you're talking about, as well as internally here at NYSERDA anyway. If there are specific opportunities that are presenting themselves, we are interested to find a way to connect with this group, this founding steering committee about, and give an opportunity for input, while we're building this structure, etc. Obviously, it's going to be a bit of a dance to balance that and not overwhelm and etc. So we're going to try to be really thoughtful about how we do that, when we do that. And some of it doesn't have to be in the context of a meeting. I think we will be establishing and setting expectations again internally here and also with other agencies, like that this is a go-to body for us for input and involvement and engagement on issues as needed. So I think it's going to be well positioned for that?
Okay, well, we are at the hour, so I want to wrap up and thank you so much for all of these great questions. If we go to the next slide, as a reminder, the application to apply to serve on the steering committee is September 22nd. We're hoping to select steering committee members by the end of October. And we really do encourage you all to reach out to your networks and organizations that you think would be great candidates to serve on the steering committee, or maybe interested in just learning more about this opportunity, or being involved in the larger collaborative body, and joining a working group later on when those are stood up. So thank you for your help in spreading the word about this exciting and new initiative. And if there's any questions, feel free to email me directly. And we will have a recording of this webinar and a list of frequently asked questions and answers on our Energy and Climate Equity webpage as soon as we can get it up. So hopefully in the next few days. Thank you again for joining today. And yes, Adam, I can resend the invitation to forward to folks. So thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.